This is Andre Jourdan of the Crew Process and the Eaglesoft Field Guide on Facebook. You are listening to hashtag POD, Podcast of Dentistry with Dr. Panks.
This podcast is sponsored by Rocketbook. I hate wasting paper. If I could, I would not use pen and paper at all. But I love the feeling of writing and drawing with pen on a nice paper. Somehow, I feel I'm connected to it, but always hated the fact that I cannot bring my drawings or ideas to the digital world. Now, Rocketbook is the exact amalgamation of both the physical and the virtual world. Hear this. You can draw or write on the Rocketbook, take a picture with the Rocketbook app, and magically it cleans the picture and sends it to Google Drive, Evernote, Dropbox, OneDrive, OneNote, Slack, Box, iCloud, iMessage, or even classic email. Just configure the symbols once and that's it. You snap a picture and your drawings or plans or notes are right in the Drive or Dropbox or anything that you choose to send it to. Once you're done, simply use a moist towel, yes, a moist paper towel, and you can erase it, only to be used again. Simply saving paper. Simply head over to podcastsofdentistry.com/rocketbook. Today's guest at hashtag POD, Podcasts of Dentistry, is an orthodontist, a photographer, a filmmaker, and a TED speaker. His name is Dr. Phil Borges. He's produced a movie called CrazyWise at CrazyWiseFfilm.com. He's one of those accomplished and humble TED speakers who's given 3 TED Talks, which has been viewed more than 4 million times. Now you'll wonder, why do we have a filmmaker being interviewed at hashtag POD? Well, he was an orthodontist too, and for those who are interested, we also talked about bonding brackets, and its story of origin. If you're hoping to learn about bonding brackets, then this podcast is not for you. This podcast is more than that. He shares his journey from being an orthodontist to photography to filmmaking. He talks about his experience meeting George Lucas from Star Wars Saga and how he was instrumental for him to turn into filmmaking. This podcast is also not about filmmaking and how to be a filmmaker, but it's a journey of exploration and adventure about ourselves. He shares his experience meeting oracles, shamans, Kutans, and even Dalai Lama. He talks about the road to enlightenment. We talked about a lot of stuff, to be honest, a lot of dense stuff, about his movie and topics like spirituality, psychosis, depression, happiness, psilocybin, and whatnot. You will have to be open-minded and you'll be in a whole different world, a world we don't know about. We also discussed other wide range of topics like motivation, meaning and purpose of life, and not to mention Tim Ferriss-inspired questions. This is indeed a dense podcast, and there is so much to learn from the whole conversation that you would want to listen to a few parts of the podcast over and over again. So without further ado, Dr. Phil Borges. Let me start with simple thing here. So many people look around, so many people want to be an orthodontist. And you are one, right?
I was one, yes.
Well, technically you still are, right?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Well, I don't practice, so.
Exactly. When did you graduate from ortho?
I graduated in 1969 from the University of California Med Center in San Francisco. And I graduated in a special program that ended with the class after mine.
Okay.
And it was a program where in our freshman year, they chose 4 students out of the class to start specializing in orthodontics.
Got it.
So I did not go to graduate school for my ortho degree. I finished in 4 years of dental school.
Ah,
So it was a special program called Curriculum 2,
okay.
and it had been going for several years, and it ended in our class.
Got it. Got
So
it.
they took the top 4 students out of the class and essentially let them start specializing in orthodontics. And everybody wanted into the program just about, so there was a lot of competition getting in. But that's how I got my orthodontic training.
So what happened? Did you practice? Did you even practice at all? Like
Yeah.
orthodontics?
Oh yeah. I it was during Vietnam.
Okay.
And so the last thing you wanted after graduating is to set up a practice. You know how much that costs,
Right.
and find a location, set up a practice, take out all the loans, and then possibly be drafted.
Right.
That was a possibility back then.
Right. Right.
So our classmates, most of my classmates, joined what they called the early commissioning program.
Okay.
When we were like sophomores in dental school.
Right.
So I joined the Air Force as a sophomore in dental school, and that allowed me to, as soon as I graduated, I went in to the Air Force and was obliged to serve for 2 years.
Okay.
As an orthodontist. And they sent me to Andrews Air Force Base in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
And I practiced there for 2 years.
So, and then what happened? What made you move, out of orthodontics to photography?
Okay. Well, that's a longer story. So after I got out of the Air Force, I came back to my hometown, the San Francisco Bay Area.
Sure.
And started looking around for a place to set up practice. And it was even hard back then getting a start. So I ended up associating with somebody in the area.
Yeah.
And then I found another practice where I started associating, and Bill Kuhn was the orthodontist that was working at the time and had a huge practice. And I started working with him, and I got to liking him so much, I decided to go into partnership with him.
Great.
And I stayed in that practice for another 16 years.
Oh, wow.
So I practiced total of 18 years. I was 45 when I decided to quit. How did I make that decision? That's what you're asking?
Yeah. I mean, it's for me to think about, I spent 16 or 18 years of my life, not to mention 4 years of my schooling, right? And whatever. And patience and relationships. And it's so hard for me to leave everything. I don't know if it was subtle, if it was cold turkey, but so I want to understand what made you at that situation, leave everything and go into photography.
Right. So let me back up a little bit and tell you how I fell in love with photography.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Which actually happened while I was in dental school.
Oh, okay.
So I'm in dental school, living in the Haight-Ashbury district of San Francisco. That's where the school was.
Right.
And the Haight-Ashbury was the epicenter of the hippie movement in the mid-'60s.
Got it. Okay.
And so it was just the center of a cultural revolution, if you would.
Yeah.
If you will. People coming from all over the United States, young people, wanting to explore a whole new way of life, and they were coming to the Haight-Ashbury district. And there was this huge renaissance and music going on. I mean, at the Fillmore Auditorium after school, we'd go down to the Fillmore, and there would be Jimi Hendrix or Janis Joplin or the Doors or all the big bands of the time playing.
Yeah.
And it was really the beginning of the concert as we know it now.
Yeah.
And so it was just a real exciting time.
Okay.
But anyway, I took out a job as a work study program, and I was working for a psychologist who was trying to figure out if free needles, there was a big hepatitis outbreak in the Hague.
Okay.
If they gave out free needles, would this help that hepatitis outbreak? Would the people use them? Mm-hmm. And so I was given the job of going down on the street and interviewing all the hippies and asking them about which drugs they're using, which drugs they're shooting, and how they're doing it, and to get an idea so she could write her paper. I'm very good at going out and meeting people, and so she wasn't as good at that. So I was being paid to do this. And I loved the job because I got to find out what was going on.
Right.
But anyway, I would pick the most outrageous looking people to interview. And soon I wanted to start doing portraits of them. So I started not only doing an interview, but I asked if I could do a portrait of them at the same time. So, and I just fell in love with photography. I took out a student loan and bought a camera, a Super 8 camera, started filming what was going on down there, and in Golden Gate Park, and all these free concerts happening.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of fell in love with photography, actually made a film that sort of was a parody of the whole dental school experience that they played at the school for years afterwards.
Yeah.
So that was my first love of photography. And I actually thought at that time, well, I'm a junior by this time I'm a junior in dental school, a year away from graduating. And I actually gave it a thought of, junking it all and going into photography at that time.
Okay.
But I had student loans. You probably know this story. I had student loans. At the time, I had a wife and child. And it was just more than I could even think about doing something that crazy. Mm-hmm. But I knew my heart was in this art form of photography.
Okay.
And so long story short, I graduate. I come back after the Air Force, I come back to the Bay Area and I get started again. And, starting a practice, I wasn't starting one, but starting in a very busy practice.
Right.
That was all consuming, and I was having a good time. I had a couple of friends that I graduated with that were very inventive, and I was collaborating with them, and we actually started some of the first direct bonding of brackets to the teeth.
Oh, okay.
When the way I was trained, the way you banded a case is you separated all the teeth with either wires that you tightened or rubber bands.
Yeah.
And then you slipped these bands that went all the way around the teeth that held the bracket. Well, that was not only painful, it took a long time to do.
Okay.
It made the case worse if there was crowding because you increased all the crowding.
Yeah.
And so this one classmate of mine, his name is Bill Barnard. He was an engineer from Stanford before he even went to dental school.
Wow. Okay.
And so he started cutting the brackets off these bands and putting a wire mesh on the back because the ability to bond a plastic coating to the enamel had just been discovered, the acid etch technique.
Yeah.
And it had just been discovered. So he figured if he could take and get the plastic to stick to the bracket
Right.
some way. So he started cutting the bands apart and put a wire mesh on the back of the bracket and sticking them on the teeth.
Okay.
And I thought, God, how ingenious is that? If it would stay, you know? And so we started working on it together, and I built this contraption with this cheek expander that just pulled the cheeks away. And so I was in this practice that was very busy. My partner was older. He wasn't as good at putting on bands. And so I was given that duty.
Right.
You band up the cases, and I'll have all the fun straightening the teeth. So, you know, I was getting blisters on my fingers from banding teeth. And so I really became motivated to find a better way of doing it. And I started working with Bill. And pretty soon we were direct bonding these homemade brackets. And it wasn't long after that the big companies, the big band companies started getting in on the act. And they started making brackets, especially with a backing that could accept the plastic and stick to the tooth. And but during that time, it was so creative, and we were coming up with these ideas. And unfortunately, we didn't patent any of our ideas.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was just the fun of doing it, and all of a sudden, a case that would take me 3 months to band, I could band in 45 minutes.
Wow, that is interesting.
And so that was huge in this big practice we were in. But anyway, after that initial part of doing the creative aspects of things, then this practice became more of an assembly line. We had several chairs working with several assistants, and unfortunately, I really like to talk with people, and it isn't, as a dentist, it isn't the best place to talk to somebody and have a conversation.
Yep.
They've got things in their mouth, and you got your fingers in their mouth, and you're trying to talk. No, it doesn't work.
Right.
And the little bit of time, especially if you're in this real fast-moving practice where you're seeing a lot of patients in a day. So I got tired of that. I got tired of, it's good money, obviously, but I really got tired of that just repetitive assembly line work.
But were you not excited that you were doing something innovative by sticking the bond and the band at that stage, or did you get bored of that also? After doing it so much.
Well, yeah. I mean, once we had created the technique, and then it was sort of a routine way to do it.
Right.
Once we had developed the way of doing it, and then it was routine, then it became more assembly line.
Were you married still at that time?
No.
Okay. Okay.
So, anyway, even 8 years before I did quit, I was thinking about quitting, and I was really investigating other ways of satisfying my creative nature. And I could have started another practice, which would have engaged me, but I didn't want to do that because I knew that eventually I would be back doing the routine.
Right.
And as you know, there's routine in everything you do, but I wanted something that expressed my vision. The stuff that I was having fun with photography while I was in dental school. So I also had the good fortune one night of going out to dinner with George Lucas,
really?
the guy who did Star Wars.
Yeah.
Because one of my good friends in dental school was married to a woman who was a cousin of his wife, Marcia Lucas.
Wow.
And so we went out to dinner together, and he had just finished this movie called American Graffiti, which became fairly popular. And he had gotten enough money to start this other thing that he really wanted to do, Star Wars. And he didn't even know the name of it at the time. And he was just talking about filming in the desert somewhere. And I was just listening to what he was doing. I thought, yeah, that sounds pretty nice.
Right.
Anyway, but it was years after. And so I always thought, well, I'll fire up my old cameras, which disappeared after I graduated from dental school. First of all, when I graduated from dental school, I immediately hit the road, hitchhiked to New York, caught a flight to Luxembourg, and started hitchhiking all over Europe just to take a break.
Oh, wow. So we're going to talk about the hitchhike thing too. But let's keep it aside. Let's keep that aside. So why your cameras were still packed, and then you took it out because you met George Lucas, in a way, because he
no, I didn't take him out at that time. It was just like, it just planted the seed in my head.
Okay.
Well, here's somebody making a living, doing what he loves, and it's right up the alley of things I was loving, getting to love anyway, but yeah.
Okay. And then what was the turning point when you said, okay, that's it. I'm done with orthodontist. I mean, obviously it was 18 years after, but what was the moment in that time when you really, really felt that, okay, I'm done. I gotta follow my passion of photography.
Yeah. Well, it actually came in stages. So about 10 years into it, I reached that point saying, yeah, I've got to make a change. And so I brought somebody else into the practice, somebody who had just graduated. He actually went to the same school I did. He was a year behind me. And I brought him in to take my place.
Okay.
And so he was going to take my place and continue practicing with our older partner, Bill.
Dr. Bill, yeah.
And so he came into the practice, and I started phasing out, started cutting down my days. I didn't know what I was going to do at the time. I just knew I needed a break to think about things. And I got a place up in Montana. I bought a little ranch.
Okay, now where are you right now?
I'm practicing in the Bay Area.
Oh, you're in San.
Where am I right now?
Right.
Where
right
I
now. Yeah.
I live in Seattle.
Seattle. Oh, Seattle. Okay. So you bought a small place in Montana, and then what?
And I decided to take a summer off and go up there and just live for the summer, and as I say, just sort of think about things. And it was a beautiful valley, and it just pristine. I grew up on a ranch, by the way, so this sort of was hearkening back to a very wonderful time in my childhood. And I bought this little place from a couple in their 90s. It was a beautiful it was only 6 acres, but it was this beautiful farmhouse with wonderful gardens and a view of the whole valley with snow-capped mountains. And it was one of those idyllic settings. And I didn't know what I was going to do back there. But I made some friends and got into the local community. But I like to do carpentry as well. So I remodeled the house a bit, and that sort of occupied me for the summer. And but the assistants gave me a call and said, really, you are leaving too early. You need to come back. And so I, after that summer, went back and started working again and rented out my little farmhouse. And I tried to make it go again. And, I felt an obligation to it. To all the patients that I somewhat knew. You don't know anybody real deeply, but
right.
Some people I got to know more. But so I continued a second try.
Okay.
And after about 7 more years, I said, I've got to take a break, and I want to take a sabbatical. And I talked it over with my partners, and my older partner at that point, well, let's see, how did this unfold? And then I said, okay, I'll take 7 weeks off. I'm going to go to New Zealand. I'm going to take my bike. I'm a big bike rider.
Okay.
I'm going to take my bike and a camera, and that's it. And I'll just go there and get a perspective on what I want to do.
Okay.
And that's what I did. So I went down there for 7 weeks. By the way, at this point, this is a very interesting time in my life. My girlfriend had gotten pregnant. So it was like, all of a sudden, am I going to get in this other relationship now, long-term relationship with a child, and stay as an orthodontist? And all of a sudden, I felt the walls kind of crushing in on.
Yeah.
That now I have another pressure, not only taking care of myself, taking care of a couple other people. And so that's when I decided to take this 7 weeks and clear my head. Anyway, I came back. I fell in love with taking pictures while I was down there. I fell in love with it again. And I should back up and say, this will be a little out of order.
That's okay.
But when my son was being born, that's when I really took out my camera and started filming again. I recorded his birth.
Wow.
And I hadn't really even touched a camera that much since I'd graduated, because I was so involved with other things. And so I recorded his birth, and I had nowhere to develop the film. I shot it in black and white film. It's back in the days of film.
Right.
And so I went to a local community college to see if I could use their dark room to develop the film. And they said, only if you take a class here.
Ooh,
okay. And I begrudgingly took a class. And I got this instructor. His name is Ron Zach. An incredible photographer, by the way.
Okay.
And he totally turned me on to the art and philosophy of photography. And within a year and a half of starting his class, I had decided to leave orthodontics for photography. Now I had something to go to other than, I'm just wanting to explore something else. I now had a sort of a target. And then I took that trip to New Zealand with a camera and just to clear my head to see if I really would leave.
So Ron Zach was in Montana then?
No, he was in the Bay Area.
Oh,
so
okay.
that whole scene of me
That was when your son was born, and you took pictures.
So,
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
So the big thing for me to go to New Zealand was, one, am I going to settle down with Julie, my present wife, by the way?
Yes.
And am I going to leave orthodontics?
Wow.
And so I came back from that trip, and I didn't decide it while I was there. I came back. I just had fun riding around in this beautiful landscape, doing my photography.
Yeah.
And I came back and I decided, yes, I'm going to leave the practice. And yeah, I'm going to settle down with Julie and Dax, my son.
Okay.
And I did it. And so I had, before I left on this trip, I had brought in another person to replace me.
Okay. Yeah.
Because in the meantime, our older partner had retired.
Yeah.
And this was at least a 2-person practice.
Sure.
And so I brought somebody in to replace me, and the person I brought in the first time, Jim, it would be his partner, and we all agreed, and I started introducing Joe, the new partner, to the patients, and started that transition. And I knew I was going to cut back, but the big question was, am I just going to cut back to a day or two a week and then have all the rest of the time for photography? Or am I going to go for it 100% and just dive in?
Right.
And so the trip to New Zealand was to kind of decide that.
And I think Ron Zach also kind of, made it easier for you to kind of.
Yeah. Well, Ron Zach turned me on to the love of it, and at a deeper level than I had known it before, and so
Okay.
And so once I decided to do it, I just started making the plans to do it. Brought Joe in more and told him I was leaving, and negotiated our exchange in terms of how he would buy into my part of the practice.
Yeah.
And I decided to move to Seattle from the Bay Area because it was much cheaper to live up here at that time.
Right.
It isn't anymore, but it was back then. And I came up here and declared myself a photographer and started looking for work. Looking for commercial jobs to support myself. Now I have a wife and child, or I have a girlfriend and child anyway at that point. And so you want me to go on with that?
Well, no, it is interesting. It is interesting. That's why I didn't want to stop you. But going back a little bit here, do you remember your meeting with George Lucas?
Yeah.
I'm sure people would like to know, the Star Wars guy. How was your meeting with him? And then I'm going to come back to your photography before we forget that part too.
Yeah. So it was George, his wife Marcia, who actually did the editing of Star Wars. She was a brilliant editor.
Okay.
And there's a whole story about that I learned later.
Okay.
From my friend, Karen Pruka, who was her cousin.
Okay.
And that's how we ended up. We were all living in Marin at that time. George was living in Marin. I lived in Marin County. Mm-hmm. And we went to this little Mexican place just to have dinner. And he was fairly quiet.
Okay.
He wasn't... That's, you asked me to remember a lot about it. I just remember him talking about, I liked his film American Graffiti, and he was talking about doing this sort of War of the Worlds type movie, and he was filming in the desert somewhere. And I was thinking to myself, I wonder if this one will catch on, I didn't think it would, it was like... but he didn't talk that much about it. He just I just remember him being somewhat quiet.
Okay.
Nice guy, but again, his wife was more outgoing than he was.
Okay. Yeah.
Marcia.
Yeah.
But I don't remember too much about it other
That's
than
okay.
that. And he and Mason, my friend that was married to Karen, the cousin of Marcia, went over to his house. I didn't go over to his house.
Yeah.
And said, yeah, he's got this amazing 1920s jukebox, and he named a bunch of stuff he had in his house.
Yeah.
Kind of cool.
Got it. Right.
But yeah, that was about all I remember. But I do remember saying, I could see doing something like that.
So do you think you were, in a way, attracted the way George Lucas was living his dream? Maybe subconsciously, if not really.
Yeah. He was doing something that is very. There's no prescribed path. Like we went to this school. You're on a conveyor belt. You do what they tell you to do, and you come out the end, and pretty well you're guaranteed of getting a job and
right.
and working.
Yeah.
In photography, it's raw capitalism. Anybody can pick up a camera. Of course, you have to have skills.
Sure.
But it's what you produce that gets you the job. It isn't your degree or piece of paper on the wall.
Right. It's still more creative. It still has more creative, what you can see, what you can shoot, and then what you can present. They are all three different things. I think you're right. So, and you declared yourself as a photographer, as you said, when you moved into Seattle.
Yeah.
How hard was for people to accept you as a photographer when you were a dentist?
Yeah.
Like,
I know. I worked with, we had about 7 or 8 assistants in the practice. So I went from hiring assistants to being an assistant to learning the craft. Yeah.
Yes.
So it's a bit of an ego reduction, but I was so in love with it. I didn't mind that part of it. And one of the things I did when I came up here, I looked at all the photographers in town, and I picked out the ones whose work I liked, and I gave them all a call and said, do you guys ever meet and share your work and talk about your ideas? This is what Ron Zach taught me a lot in terms of how to, engage with others that are involved in the work and discuss your ideas, how stimulating that was. So I actually, as a newbie here, formed a support group.
Okay.
And first of all, they said, who are you? Where? I said, I'm new to the field.
Sure.
And one person didn't want to join because of that.
Yeah.
But the others said, okay, let's do it. We had always had wanted to get together, but we'd never thought of a way of doing it. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we started that, and I got very involved in the photography community. I became president of the ASMP, American Association of Media Photographers, and tried to get commercial work.
Okay.
But again, no one knew me, so I wasn't getting any work. And the beauty of that, though, I learned later, was it forced me to do my own work without having somebody telling me what they wanted. And that way I could develop my own style, my own voice in the field. And so all I had was doing my own work and meeting with other photographers. And it took me about almost 4 years. Four
Okay.
years before I got a job.
Hmm.
From 87 to about 92. To 91, yeah. And so I was nervous during that time.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Uh,
And so
were you did you start to doubt your decision at that moment within those 4 years, from 87 to 91, when you did not get a good job? I mean, I'm sure you had some savings from your
yeah.
work before, but and then maybe you were getting some more money from them, whatever. But
Yeah.
for 4 years, you worked so hard. Did you ever think that you were not up to the level or up to the mark, and you took a wrong decision to change your profession?
I didn't think in terms of I made a bad decision leaving, because I knew my soul needed a change.
Okay.
I needed something to revitalize my I could say creative juices, but to revitalize my passion
Okay.
about what I was doing. And I knew I moved up to Seattle also to burn the bridges. I didn't have a license to practice up here.
Right.
I didn't want to be tempted to go back and get a job working for somebody as an associate in their practice. That would have been even worse,
And in those 4 years, I'm sure your wife was with you, but did she have did you have any conflict? Hey, we were doing better in, I don't know, San Francisco. Now we in a small town, small house.
Yeah.
Did you face that kind of? And if you did, I'm sorry if it's too private, but as I said, go ahead.
You mean pressure from my
Family.
It's still my girlfriend, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
No, she didn't live with me as a rich orthodontist.
Okay.
This was all just being with me and her new son, and
Yes.
so
Yeah.
there was no
Okay.
pressure like that.
Great.
She supported me in every way she could, and still does. So that wasn't an issue. Everybody asked me that. What did your wife say? God.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have that pressure at all.
So now let's fast forward a little bit. So you got your first job, and and then it took you 4 years. But in the meanwhile, you also developed your own style of what you wanted to, photograph, or your voice, as you said. Where is that coming from? Where is that voice coming from? In the sense, I'm trying to ask is, why were you leaning towards going to Tibet or Dharamsala, India?
Yeah.
And Ecuador, Amazon, and so on. Where is that coming from? And
Okay. That's a long story too.
Oh yeah.
So lucky this is long form.
Yeah, it is long one. Don't worry about it. Somebody gets bored, they can obviously shut it off. Who cares?
So anyway, I finally started getting work. And to do that, you had to put an ad in a book that went around to graphic designers and art directors around the country and in Europe.
Okay.
And you just took a selection of your photographs and put them in the book.
Right.
And I had developed all these. I was having fun, coming up with new ideas on the way to make images look different. And I really loved portraiture. I really loved that part of photography.
Right.
And so I started shooting with infrared film, using it as a portrait film.
Yeah.
And it gave a very interesting glow. And I decided to do a whole series on African Americans that I met up here in Seattle, and put out a series that eventually ended up in a gallery up here called African American Beauty. And it just, with the images, I shot it on 70 millimeter infrared film, which was used by the Department of Defense for seeing hot spots and for locating marijuana fields, by the way, in aerial photography. But anyway, this film I really loved, and it was very hard to work with. And so no one else knew really how to do it the way I was doing it. And I was toning my photographs a certain way that gave them this very unique look. And I put those in this book. And the first year, I still didn't get any jobs. And it was the second year. The first year, I had just nothing but photographers calling me, asking me how I did what I did.
Okay.
But no jobs. And the second year, I started getting jobs, and all of a sudden, I was getting a lot of work.
Sure.
And I remember I was getting annual reports, album covers, and one of the jobs I got was a very lucrative job, was romance novel covers.
Okay.
And I did about, I don't know how many, maybe 50 of them.
Okay.
Before I finally, and they were very lucrative to do. I got to where I could do them very easily, very fast. And it became another assembly line. and I had to ask myself, did I leave orthodontics for this assembly line?
Wow. Yeah.
Even though both were very lucrative.
Yeah.
And I went to a party one night, and I met a Tibetan young woman, who had started a campaign here in Seattle to make people more aware about what was happening in Tibet politically.
Right.
And so with the Chinese takeover of Tibet, and I listened to her, and I said, I want to go over there and do this story in my own way. And we started talking, and I told her what I was into. She knew my work. She had seen, by that time, I'd have a couple of gallery shows here in Seattle. And so we decided to pair up together and do this. She had no money to support me, but she could hook me up with interpreters in Dharamsala.
Yeah.
Where she suggested I start. She said, I wouldn't go to Tibet right off the bat, go to Dharamsala. And anyway, as a guide, I started working. I went over there and spent 5 weeks doing portraits of a lot of the refugees coming out of Tibet, escaping from Tibet, and met the Dalai Lama at that time. Most importantly, I met the Oracle of Tibet, the Nechung Oracle, which was a young monk at the time, 30 years old, who I was invited to watch go into trance and channel the spirit entity of the Nechung Oracle. And then I got to interview him after that. And that's when I first learned that these visionaries and healers in the developing world, so many of them were identified in their youth by having what we might call a psychotic break from reality.
Yeah.
They were hearing voices or seeing visions, having personality changes. They were very frightened. They didn't know what was happening to them. Many thought they were dying.
Yeah.
And so that became the seeds of what I did 25 years later, the film I released 8 years ago.
CrazyWise.
So, I mean, the film I started 8 years ago and released 2.5 years ago.
Tell us more about this specific Nechung, if I hope I'm pronouncing correct. Nechung
Oracle.
Yes, Nechung Oracle.
Okay. The Nechung Oracle is a protector spirit of the Tibetan people. That's what the Tibetans believe.
Okay.
They believe of this spirit protector.
Okay.
And this spirit protector can be brought into our reality through a person known as a Kutan.
Okay.
And a Kutan is a human being who has the ability to go into a trance-like state and have this spirit take over their body and speak through them. I guess that'd be the best. We would call it channeling.
Right.
Okay. So I met the Kutan.
Okay.
And he lived in this monastery, a very small monastery, right next to the Dalai Lama's residence in Dharamsala.
Okay.
And that's where I went to watch him go into trance.
Okay.
And I was invited by a friend of mine that was doing an article for a London newspaper on the Dalai Lama. And he had been invited, and he invited me to go along with him.
Got it. So you're a man, or at least your initial training was, a science guy, a math guy, doing ortho, mechanics, engineering. Did you believe when you, saw an oracle like that who was in trance and channeling the energy of nature at that time?
Yeah. So, okay, this will be another little long story.
That's okay. That's okay.
I was raised a Mormon.
Okay.
In the Mormon church.
Yeah.
And after my father died, which happened when I was 7, my mom became very religious, and she was born a Mormon. And so she became very much into the religion. And I was going to church 9 times a week.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Totally immersed in the Mormon church.
Wow.
I actually went to Brigham Young University after I graduated from high school, a Mormon college in Utah.
Okay.
And after 1 year of it, I said, I was 17 years old, going on 18. I can't believe this anymore, the dogma. And I quit Brigham Young and started going to Berkeley and transferred to Berkeley.
Okay.
Totally different atmosphere.
Sure.
In terms of that.
Yeah.
And so I went from being this kind of deeply immersed in a religion to becoming an atheist. And so when I was in dental school, a couple of things happened. One, I started experimenting with marijuana a bit, and then a little bit with like mescaline and LSD, but not that much like some people were really taking it a lot. I only took it a couple of times, but it opened me up in a way. I knew there was a lot more going on than I knew with my rational mind.
Right.
And then one night, my roommate wanted to go down and see this psychic in the city. And I went down to visit this woman. Oops. Let me shut this off. I went down to visit this woman by the name of Madame Rousseau. So I went down to visit this psychic with my friend, and it was in San Francisco, and she was in her living room, and there were about 12 people there. And we all, when we entered, they gave us an envelope with a piece of paper, and we were to write down our questions and seal the envelope and then put them in this basket.
Okay.
And I did that, and I thought, this was just a joke for me to go down there.
Yeah.
And so I wrote down some things like, I'm a student. What am I a student of? How old am I? These very basic questions
Sure.
definite answers. And so she was up on this kind of raised platform, very heavy set woman with a big picture of Jesus behind her. It's just, the whole scene was kind of funny. But everybody in the audience are very serious and listening to her, and she's talking to them, and she like contacts spirits that would tell her about the person, and so I'm being entertained by this. Anyway, she gets to my envelope, and the only reason I knew it was mine, she just picked it up and she just said, this person's testing me. And there's a lot of people here with very serious questions that they're very concerned about. I wish you wouldn't waste their time and mine, and just put the envelope down and went on to the next one.
Oh, okay.
So that kind of caught my attention. And so I went back a couple of times, and she started answering things that I had no idea how she would know.
Okay.
And so that opened me up a little bit. So to say, when I saw the Kutan go into trance and start talking in a very strange voice, and all the monks writing everything down, I was open to it. I didn't believe it, but I was saying, there could be something here.
Yeah.
So I slowly opened over the years.
Yeah.
And now I've talked to enough people that I'm not only open to the idea, I know something is there. Yeah.
So you were religious.
Or I'm a lot more sure. Let's put it that way.
Makes sense. So you were religious, and then you became atheist. Then you saw Madame Rousseau, and then what are you now?
What am I now? Who are you? That's a real deep one.
Well,
that would take me all night.
Yeah, I know. But let's say if you wanna give a couple of words,
where my beliefs are now, which change with time. I believe that thinking of myself as Phil Borges, the sack of skin that has done this and that over the years, is a narrative that creates the illusion of somebody that's separate from the whole. And I think I live in that illusion of being separate from everything else around me. Instead of, I'm just part of this consciousness that I'm experiencing, or is being experienced.
Okay.
There's no I am.
I got you.
But I live in that illusion. There are people that I have been interviewing that have broken through that illusion, and it's been frightening to them when they lose their ego boundaries and lose their ego sense of self. And these are people that some of them were put on medications. Most of them were told they had this or that disorder, usually in the range of psychosis. Bipolar is very popular now, schizoaffective, schizophrenia. And I think they touch into a place of an ego dissolution, or a jarring of their ego or their identity. They're put into what we used to call an identity crisis through either something that's happened in their childhood or something that's happening in their current life, a loss of something that they base their identity on. I
got it.
Am I answering your question?
Yeah. I think
so.
As you said, go ahead.
I think I am living in this illusion of being separate because I haven't had one of those experiences.
Sure.
I touched on it a little bit with the psychedelics, but I haven't really been experimenting with them now in my older years. I'm thinking about it, though. I'm interviewing a lot of neuroscientists and people that are doing the new research. There's a whole renaissance in research around psychedelics and what they do to create the experiences they create in the brain.
Yeah, I think maybe you're hinting towards psilocybin, right?
Yeah, they're mostly working with psilocybin and LSD. The neuroscientists that I've interviewed, anyway.
Right. So, I think John Hopkins and Tim Ferriss is doing a lot of research himself by sponsoring a big chunk of research at John Hopkins about psilocybin.
Yeah. And they're studying deep meditators, by the way, as well, like Tibetan monks who have meditated for thousands of hours.
Right.
And Judson Brewer was doing a lot of that work. And it turns out that meditation, psychedelics, and a psychosis have many similarities in the effects that they produce.
Interesting. Do you meditate?
Yes.
What is your ritual like? What is your meditation ritual like?
I've been for years meditating, just following my breath, 20 minutes a morning.
Okay.
Lately, I've been doing a little more long-form guided meditations. One of them, I think of the chakra centers and infuse them with the higher vibration, which means love, gratitude, and joy, versus regret, anger, and all the lower vibration energies. So I do that, and more or less staying in the present moment as much as possible, not only during meditation while I'm sitting, but all during the day. My mind can just take off and I just go into daydreams. I have a strong tendency for that.
No.
Coming out of the present moment.
Right. Was your meeting with Dalai Lama in Dharamsala anything important happen at that time, or was it just like nothing happened? You just he saw you, and that's it.
Well, I didn't get any big buzz out of being in his presence. But I did get a lot of admiration for him. I'm usually suspicious of popular leaders because you never know what they're really like. But on one occasion, I got to stand right next to him while he was seeing a whole group of new arrivals from Tibet come in.
Yeah.
Like all these people and by the way, to them, he's a total god.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of women that fainted at his feet as they were coming through this line. It was almost like a reception line as he was greeting them as they came in.
Yeah.
And but he would take all the time in the world to be with them and hold their hand and talk to them and make sure they have a place to stay that night. And his handlers just want to keep this crowd moving because he has other appointments. And I just saw how genuine it was in that situation. But what really got me, and it really changed my whole project that I was doing, that I set myself up to go over there and do a human rights story, right? But so I spent the 5 weeks interviewing a lot of these refugees. Why are you leaving Tibet? What happened to you in Tibet? So many of them had been thrown in jail for protesting the occupation of the country, tortured while they were in jail, one guy had all his teeth kicked out. And I mean, it was just all these horrible stories of family members being killed. And so there was a little sign that went up in Dharamsala on a bulletin board, said the Dalai Lama is going to give a public address.
Okay.
So I went to that, and there was this huge crowd out in front of this little stage where he sat. And there was a FM radio that a couple of us Westerners could go and listen to. The movie star, Richard Gere, was one of the, there were about 10 of us in this little place listening to this FM radio. And he told the crowd, I mean, it was a long, about a half an hour talk. But during that talk, he told all these people out there, and I was looking out into the crowd. I was kind of where I could look into the crowd and then look over to the side to see the Dalai Lama. And I saw a lot of the people I interviewed out there. And he said to the crowd, I'll never forget it. He said, treat your enemies as if they were precious jewels, because it's your enemies, not your friends, but your enemies that are going to take you to a place of enlightenment or something to that effect. They're going to teach you what you need to learn to become enlightened. They're going to show you in my words, they're going to show you your triggers and what takes you out of your sense of being one and thinking that they're different, they're the other. So that's when I decided I'd build this whole book that I was planning on doing, an exhibition around compassion. And here was a leader, most leaders come to power on anger and frustration and that sort of thing. This is the leader just going in the opposite direction, taking people away from the anger and away from the victimhood and into their own process.
Right.
And I thought, man, this guy is really for real. And so when I finally got to be with him one-on-one and doing his portrait, it was like 4 PM, and I had talked his handlers, his secretary, to let me take his picture up on his rooftop.
Okay.
And that was a big feat in itself. They wanted me to do it on his front porch, and I wanted the mountains in the back.
Okay.
So they agreed, and I was up there on the rooftop waiting for him. And he was, as always, busy meeting people and helping people. And so he was a couple hours late, and the sun was going down, and I was thinking, man, I'm going to miss this shot.
Sure. Yeah.
Because the light is changing, and I'm using a strobe light, and I have to balance ambient light with the strobe, and I have to shoot a Polaroid to get that balance, and that balance is changing every 10 minutes. So I'm all nervous when he shows up.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to greet him. I held out my hand to shake his hand, and he just kind of avoided my hands and took his fingers around my sides, jabbed them into my sides, tickled me, and just laughed out loud. And so, he had his way of putting me at ease. He saw how, tense I was. Yeah. Because that was my only chance to get his photo, and I needed it for the exhibition I was doing.
Now,
but so that's my experience of the Dalai Lama.
Interesting. So, after talking to so many followers, you must have heard their definitions of road to enlightenment, right? What did you figure out, or what would you say their definition might be for the road to enlightenment?
You mean the Tibetans?
Yes, or whoever you interviewed, and because that would be your first-hand experience rather than generically people who are talking.
Um,
or
well,
do you have your own?
in talking to the Tibetans, you meet there's so much devotion in that culture to their practice. Uh, there are people that go into a cave for a couple of years to meditate.
Right.
Some I took a picture during that time of somebody that was going into a cave. He was 43 years old.
Okay.
He was going into a cave for the rest of his life to meditate.
Wow.
And I met people that were prostrating all the way to Lhasa from the far eastern part of Tibet. Like going 1,600 miles, like inchworms, prostrations.
Yes,
you know what they are?
yes.
And which would take them a year to get to the Jokong. And, you touch your forehead to the ground. They had these big calluses on their forehead. So I'd ask, a lot of these people, why would you go into a cave for the rest of your life?
Yeah.
Or why, this prostration all the way to, for a year?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is to get over the enemies of enlightenment, which are self-grasping, self-cherishing. It all had to do with reducing self-importance in my mind. And so I think that would be the answer I came away with, is getting over self-importance, whether you do it through service to others or going into a cave and meditating for years or whatever. That's the goal of getting over that sense of illusionary self.
And that is hard. That is
especially in our culture, which is built around individualism.
Capitalism. We've got new iPhone 11, by the way.
That's right.
So photography was your passion. Obviously, so Dalai Lama is a huge project, obviously, in a sense you were invited, and now you continued doing the same thing. You went to Pakistan, you went to Ecuador. What made you continue doing the same thing? It's hard out there. To relative sense of comfort, what we have in Seattle or San Francisco or Connecticut, wherever, but it's relatively hard. And I was reading and listening to someplace researching that you even took your son to, I think, Pakistan, right?
Yeah.
When he was young. So why go through such a, for the lack of better term, hard life, relatively?
I just loved, I did this all over the world, over the 25-year period. And it largely came from my time in the ranch in Utah growing up. Did I talk to you about that?
Just a little bit, yeah.
I did another podcast this morning, and I went into detail about that. But anyway, just being around people that live close to the land, and that was it brought me back to my childhood, and I loved it. I loved going to these different places. Yeah, it's hard. You're sleeping in mud huts or a tent, and sometimes you're sleeping with 18 other people in the mud hut. People talking in their sleep or snoring, and no privacy to speak of, which we're used to, which they're not.
Right.
But there is a joy also that I saw in the people in these communities that we've lost in general. In general. We are much more isolated from each other in general. And that fascinated me. I'd come back here and I'd really notice, hey, I don't know all my neighbors here. They know everybody.
They know everybody.
And not only that, they rely on them. There's no old age homes or daycare centers or grocery stores or lawyers to solve their arguments. They have to depend on each other and in their intimate relationships to take care of human needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have lost our ability to do that to a certain extent at a deep level.
Sure.
I mean, and I think that accounts for our rise of depression, anxiety, which is increasing exponentially, by the way. And it's now the number one cause of disability in the world, according to the World Health Organization.
Sure.
Suicides up substantially, like 24% in 15 years.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in a crisis, really. And there's things we've forgotten about our human needs. And we've institutionalized taking care of those human needs when we need to do it person to person, or we need to have those bonds with each other.
So how do you think people can come out of this phase of depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts? I mean, obviously, we saw the movie Crazy Wise. If for my audience who doesn't know, Dr. Phil Borges produced a movie called Crazy Wise. It's called as CrazyWiseFilm.com. And I watched it. But how do you think depression, anxiety, suicides are gonna come down? What can we do? And how can we learn from what you're doing?
Yeah. And so how do we reform community? How do we start communing more with each other and relying on each other and getting back to being with each other on a more intimate and reciprocal, caring way, in a reciprocal and caring way? And, one of the disadvantages, just like I left religion, most people your age and the young people are leaving religion because, you think of the dogma behind it and you start thinking, it's a fairy tale, just like I left and became an atheist. But that was one of the places where we would commune.
Right.
And even though I didn't believe in the dogma, I could see the value in going to church and being with this certain group of people. And they knew my mother was a widow. They would give me a job anytime I needed it. We took care of each other. We called each other brother and sister. It was brother so-and-so, sister so-and-so. But that's all gone away now. So that's left our culture without really strong means of bonding in an intimate way. I think the stats are done by the Gallup poll. They asked this question 3 decades ago of American men, I believe the study was. Who would you call on in a crisis? How many people do you have that you could call on if you were in crisis mode? And 3 decades ago, I think the answer was 2 or 3 people that they could name.
Okay.
The most common answer right now is none.
Wow.
Over 50% say none. We're connected like we've never been connected before, but on the social media connection, with teenagers, I just got back doing a film project with teenagers in Thailand.
Oh, great.
I just got back last week from doing this, and they started talking. So the thing I wanted them to explore through interviews with each other, which we set up on film,
yeah,
is This was at an international school, by the way,
Okay.
where there were kids from all over Asia. There were Chinese kids, Korean kids, Tibetan, some Americans, but mostly Asian kids. Anyway, I said, what do you do for community? What do you do to express your authenticity? Because I think we need both of those for our good mental health. We need to be authentic. We need to come from our emotions, know our emotions, and be able to express our emotions.
Sure.
We need community to do that with. We need to be bonded with other people where they can help us and take care of us and we can help them.
Yeah.
Those are human needs. And so I asked the kids to explore that. So they got into things like peer pressure and social media. And what they said about social media is, it used to be when you were bullied at school, you could go home at night and get away from it.
Right.
They said, now you're with it 24/7.
Right.
It's happening online. And the other thing is, I remember being in high school and thinking, God, wouldn't it be nice to be more popular and be more accepted by the group here?
Yeah.
And I was, I wasn't one of the most popular kids in high school by any means. And so now they have Facebook.
Yeah.
And who has the most likes?
Right.
And what are they doing to get those likes? And what do you do if you post a picture and nobody likes it? So they're constantly faced with this very statistically reliable way to test their popularity, right?
Sure. I understand.
And it puts pressure on them and they do things not out of their authenticity, but out of what would get them liked online.
Right.
They'll put the pictures out there they think will get the most likes. It's not necessarily who they are.
Right.
So it's taking them away from their authenticity. It's the bullying becomes an issue in certain cases. So they had a lot of negative things to say about social media. They say also, it isn't all negative. It's, it's nice to be able to connect with my mom and dad back in wherever.
Yeah.
And to keep track of people at a distance that we know and love. But there's this other dark side. And it's being borne out. The amount of depression and suicidal thoughts pretty closely correlates with the hours spent on social media. Now, for teenagers.
Right. So let's talk about our age. Obviously, it becomes our responsibility to take care of our own kids, to teach them that, okay, you should be authentic. You should present what your real thoughts are. If you have some bad thoughts or whatever, come to mama, come to daddy, come to your parents and family to talk about it, be open about it. But how do we handle people of, my age, who are somehow depressed for whatever reasons. We don't know why they are, maybe they had a bad experience. Like I know I was watching your movie, Adam, he had a bad experience by his grandfather, and how do we handle, how can we bring them out? So I am not, God's grace, I'm not depressed. I'm happy to be with people around, but how do and I don't understand depression then because I'm not part of it. Right.
Right.
So, and I caught that line in the movie, people don't understand your thoughts, when they are feeling these voices in the head or depression or the suicidal thoughts. How do you bring such people of our age or our generation, out of this and, live their life the way they should and not really depend on those tens of medications that you need to take.
Yeah. It's difficult. The most common thing is we all want a quick fix, right? We want to take a pill and have it be done with.
Right.
And this is not amenable to a quick fix usually. What I have gathered by all the interviews and watching the people go through it in my movie,
right?
In the movie CrazyWise, is somehow, if it's childhood, there's a lot of childhood trauma that drives us, and that we're unaware of because it's in our subconscious.
Right.
So finding ways to get in touch with some of that. In the movie, you noticed Adam came to the realization that his grandfather had molested him during a Vipassana meditation retreat.
Wow.
Going into deep meditation. And Vipassana, for those who don't know, 10 days meditation, 10 hours a day, silent meditation.
It's hard. I looked it up before because I think Tim Ferriss been to Vipassana multiple times, and I could not take 10 days off my work. And they're booked all the way up till April or May already for 2020, by the way. So
well, there's 400 Vipassana centers around the world.
Right.
So, but it's and they're free. You go there, you can't even pay the first time. Then they'll ask you to donate if you've enjoyed your experience.
Right.
But anyway, so that's one way of getting to that deeper sense of deeper emotional issues.
Okay.
There's breath work, holotropic breath work, which is another thing that you could have your listeners look up.
Sure.
But it's basically getting in touch with your feelings and experiencing them. That's what it seems like that the people who have successfully done it, like Akaya in our film. She completely transformed her life, but she had to go through this initiation where she was put in touch with all her feelings. And as she said, I hurt, I cried, and I was being pushed, and it was very uncomfortable, but I had to stop numbing those feelings with the medications. I had to start being with them, and to where they diffused. She diffused those emotions that were inside of her, and that to me is the way out of it, as far as I can tell.
Right.
I'm not talking from experience because I haven't had this experience, but I'm talking from a journalist, an interviewer who's interviewed many people who have. And that's one of the things, getting to know yourself and your emotional self. And there's other ways besides Vipassana and breath work. There's multiple therapies out there.
Right.
But all called now alternative therapies because they're alternative to just the straight medication.
Right.
Medication is like a Band-Aid, really. I mean, I'm not down on medications because there are times when you definitely need those. Everybody we interviewed said, I'm glad I have those. Every therapist we interviewed said, I'm glad I have those in my toolbox.
Right.
But it's like a cast for your arm.
Right.
Eventually, you want to be able to take that off and be able to handle your emotional life without them.
Sure. So basically, I think I liked the last 3 to 5 minutes of the movie. I loved that part where one of the researchers was talking about 3 circles: mind, body, and spirit, which comes up towards the end. And they are talking about mindfulness, the purpose of your life, which self-agency in the part of mind, body, is like housing that it's like your house, like your exercise. You have the nutrition. You have to have a good sleep. Should have a place to go to so that you can, revive back, and obviously spiritual, so that you have connection either to nature, spirituality, and not to mention the community. I love that last gist of 3 to 5 minutes of the movie and loved it. And the last 3 to 5 minutes, I was almost going to shut off the movie, and I saw Adam actually singing the last song. His rap song. Actually, it was pretty good. I was
I wish I would have put that more in the middle of the movie.
Right. I think it was pretty good. But I think with this podcast, people would go and stay for another 2 minutes and see if Adam rapping there. So that was really nice. I love that.
In terms of depression and the body, yes, exercise. That'd be the first thing I'd ask somebody. Are you exercising regularly? That's one of the surest ways to help.
Yes.
Getting the right nutrition, of course, getting enough sleep. So body is very, very important. Then you can start dealing with all the mental, emotional issues.
Right.
Like, any current traumas happening in your life that you know about, or then the past traumas that you don't know about.
How do you think, like people go through, 50% of the marriages end up in divorce, right? Do you have any, do you have any insights, I should say, into how does that impact a kid, because he or she, the kid, basically is not with the parent for, the way she or he was, when they were younger. Maybe they didn't remember a lot, but they were younger. They were kids, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever. But I think my understanding is they still miss the other parent, right? Do you think it could impact them in ways that we cannot even measure or they are? Because I talked to one of my friends and he was like, oh no, kids are very resilient, but do you think it impacts them when they don't see the other parent and only see one?
No, there's no doubt losing a parent. Well, I lost a father at 7, so and that deeply impacted me. And I wouldn't know how deep it was without the people that were around me at the time telling me later that, like my teachers told my mom that in school I was just staring out the window for a full year.
Oh, wow.
I was just totally in another world. I wasn't present. And during that time, I almost died myself of double pneumonia. And so, deeply impacts. And not only, I lost my parent to a lung cancer, but if you lose a parent to divorce, it's usually preceded by a lot of friction in the household and a lot of tension and bad feelings. And that does a number on anybody that's forming their personality. I think childhood trauma has been way underrated as to how important that is in our lives as adults.
So you've seen and talked and to so many different kind of people, and they, in a way, it's all gloomy. In a way, it's all sad, right? You're talking about whether it's Adam or Ikaya or any of those people you talk to, right? Whether it was in Tibet, but it's all gloomy, it's all sad. What I'm trying to ask is, how do you not get affected, or do you get affected by such negative experiences, even though you're just interviewing them and you're not, you're only involved, how do I say, mentally, and you're not,
Right, right.
not with the heart. But it's hard not to get involved either. We all are human beings.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you handle, all those negativities, the trauma and the bad news, and yourself personally?
There's good and bad in when I'm doing these interviews. There's not all just woe is me coming from the people I interview. So it makes it kind of fascinating, and it's my curiosity that really keeps me passionate about doing it. And I don't. Yeah, there's times when I just think, well, how did you put up with that? How did you survive that? But that becomes a fascination. How did you do it? And how are you handling it now? And so I don't come away with a lot of heaviness, to tell you the truth. And I always felt bad about that, but that's just the way I am.
Okay.
I have, in terms of, stepping in when things get bad. The part of the movie where Adam gets beat up and almost killed and gets his teeth kicked out by a gang.
Yeah.
So he's over in Hawaii, homeless, sleeping on the beach. And this would take a little bit too long to talk about, but I'll try and make it short. He goes into a grocery store in a little town in Maui and asks if he could have their day-old sandwiches that they just throw in the garbage can. And the owner of the store said, no, you can't.
Wow. So
he asks the girl at the register. She goes up to ask the owner upstairs, and she comes down and says, sorry, you can't. So Adam that night climbs over a fence, gets into the garbage can, pulls out the sack of day-old sandwiches, climbs back over the fence, and takes them to his friends out on the beach. Well, I'm sure there was a video camera because the thing was lit. And the owner saw this, and the owner, I'm almost positive, this isn't for sure, but this is what I believe happened.
Okay.
Sicked a gang on him, because the next day, Adam was sitting on the road near that store, and a person, there was a member of the gang, came by and said, where are you going today? And he said, I'm going down to Little Beach and we're going to play guitars. And he said, oh, okay, great. I'd love to come along. I'll see you down there. So this guy shows up, and he's got 5 or 6 of his friends. They're a gang, a local gang.
Right.
And they start playing music with him, and then all of a sudden turn on him and try to kill him. Wow. I mean, literally throw a rock the size of his head down on his face, cracking his jaw right in half. And then they start kicking him, kicking out his back molars. Yeah. You know what as a dentist, I know what it takes to knock a tooth out.
Oh, yeah.
It's not easy. So he's severely beaten up. And so Adam gives me a call from the hospital that night. He's been wired up, and they're about to release him.
Okay.
And so I call his oral surgeon, the guy that wired him up, wired his jaw together.
Yeah.
And I said, what type of treatment is he going to get now? And he said, we're done with him. He hasn't got any, this is all we can do.
Yeah.
And he said, it'd be best if he got back to Seattle. He said, right now we're letting him go. And he says, if he goes back on the beach, this gang will come and kill him, because he's a material witness to what happened. And so, one of the rules as a documentary filmmaker is you don't get involved. You're just a fly on the wall that's watching things unfold.
Right.
But, to let Adam go out and get killed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I had to get involved and send a ticket over, get him flown back to Seattle. But things like that come up where you're, you try to do something. Most of my work as a human rights photographer was trying to get help or to bring awareness into what was going on and in these communities, what they were struggling with just to survive and maintain their culture. So, but in terms of,
I think
I felt bad for Adam, but
so you don't
you
don't bring those emotions back home.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Everybody asks me that, and I always feel bad because I would say, "Oh, yeah, I was down for a week." No, I'm not.
Okay. So now, I think there was. Let's try to change the tone a little bit here. You were at. Seems like you did blend in one of the Rouhani tribes when you were wearing only an underwear.
Oh,
I saw that picture. Do you want to share that story if you could?
Oh,
that would be a little fun one.
I was being the host for a series on Discovery Channel called Trailblazers, and they wanted to follow me into different places as I found the different shaman I was interviewing.
Yeah.
And one of them was in the Rouhani tribe in Ecuador, in the Amazon.
Yeah.
And so anyway, there's a crew of 4 people. There's a cameraman, a sound man, myself, and a director.
Okay.
And we're to go down into the Amazon and go into the Rouhani tribe, kind of a remote tribe, and find the Amazon. And I've done all the research, and we're going to go down in there. So I take off with the sound man on a flight, and the cameraman and the director were on another flight. So we land in Quito, Ecuador, and to wait for the other 2 to come the next day.
Yeah.
And that night, all the volcanoes blow up in and around Quito, and cover the whole place with about 6 inches of ash. And so they couldn't come in. So we were stuck there another 2 days without anything to do or shoot. So we went up to a village up in the Andes. And this wasn't a shaman. This was what they call a curandero. And we decided we would just film a curandero doing their work.
Okay.
And so we went to this town, Otavalo, and found this kid on the street and said, do you go to any of the curanderos around here? And he said, yeah, I go to this guy by the name of David. And if we pay for a limpia or a cleaning, or one of their ceremonies, will you go and do it if we can film it? And he said, sure, I'd love to. And so he takes us to his curandero, and we get there.
Yeah.
And this guy looks at both of us, and he said, I can't do it on you, pointing to this kid we found.
Okay.
I need to do it on you. I mean, obviously, he knows I have the money, right? This And so Cliff, the sound guy, had a camera.
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, let's go for it. And said, okay. So he took me through this ceremony, which had me stripped down to my underpants. First, he beat me with stinging nettle.
Uh-oh. Okay.
All over my body. Then he took mouthfuls of 100% alcohol. By the way, he sent us out to get the 100 proof alcohol.
Ooh.
Or 200 proof, whatever it was. And he took that into his mouth, held a candle out in front of him, and you saw the flames coming all over me. Burned all the hair off my arms. And so anyway, all for the sake of this film, I became the guy getting this limpia done. That was that scene.
That was okay. Any other fun moments you had? Any part of your travel? Whether it's Tibet, Dharamsala, or whatever.
Oh God, there's a lot of fun moments. Funny, oh geez. Just human reactions. That's what I always get a big kick out of. Something happens and somebody's playing a joke on somebody else. I mean the humor that goes around. I had one instance where I was in Irian Jaya, which is the primitive side of Papua New Guinea. It's the Indonesian half, and it's now known as West Papua. And I had a guide, and we were going into the backcountry for I think 3 weeks that time, and we had a couple of porters. And anyway, we get up to the top of this hill. This is very remote, by the way. There's tribes in this part of the world that no one's ever contacted.
Okay.
And we get up to the top of this hill. We're looking down in this little kind of meadow, and there's guys down there naked. They're all naked down there. They wear gourds on their penis gourds, bones coming out of their nose, all this pig grease all over them, feathers in their hair. Anyway, they're down there throwing spears at each other. Uh-oh. And I said to my guide, Onus, I said, "Are we really going down there?" He said, "Don't worry about it. It's just like a football game. They're just having some fun."
Oh, wow.
So I walked down there, and this guy comes up to me, one of them, and he just walks right up to me and looks at me and looks up and down at me. And I'm wearing my clothes and everything.
Yeah.
Here he is, like he is. And he just starts laughing.
Okay.
He bursts out laughing, and he's looking around at his friends and looking back at me and laughing more. So I'm looking at him, and I start laughing.
Sure.
Look at you, man. You're laughing at me. And I'll never forget this. We caught each other in the eye, and there was something, a recognition that happened between us. And it was like, the way I described it is, it's like I met somebody at a Halloween party that I hadn't seen for 3 or 4 years. Oh my God, it's you.
It's you. Oh, I've seen you 3 years ago. I forgot. Okay.
Yeah, I've had some interesting experiences like that. Yeah.
Sure. Now, you said, I think we were discussing that time initially, and you said you have 3 more TED Talks. One of them is based on, is about spirituality. Am I right?
Yeah.
The other 2 are based on?
Well, you see, these others were, in the first TED Talk I did on the main stage.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what I was getting into. I didn't even know what TED was back then.
Sure.
They just invited me, and I went down, and it turns out, Al Gore was presenting Inconvenient Truth at that TED Talk. It was I was 2006 or 7.
7, I think, yeah.
And so there were all these heavyweights speaking, and they wanted me to, so I was totally intimidated. But anyway, yeah, I had to speak between Tony Robbins, which is his motivational speaker, and
I know Tony Robbins.
Gore.
Yeah.
And but after that, and I spoke mainly about disappearing cultures, the fact that 50% of the kids do not speak their language, and so our cultural diversity is really going extinct, much like the species extinction, but nobody talks too much about it.
Right.
Anyway, that's that one was all about. But since that time, especially since I started getting more involved with shamanism and now CrazyWise, the talks sort of started going in that direction.
Right.
And so the one that has gotten the most attention is the one that I didn't title it. The producers of the TEDx, the ones I've done since then, I haven't been the main TED stage. They've been TEDx talks. Mm-hmm. And the one that's gotten the most attention is titled Psychosis and Spirituality.
Okay.
And that really surprised me that so many people would be interested in that subject. But there are quite a few. I think there's 2.6 million hits on that site right now. Mm-hmm. So
I'm sure people can, certainly watch the TED Talks. I'll put everything in the show notes for them to go through all those TEDx talks also. Do you want to, in very brief, want to explain how the two are related, like the psychosis and the spirituality, or they're not even related? Because I haven't watched it.
Yeah, no, I definitely think they're related at this point. But first of all, I have to define the word spirituality.
Great.
Because it means different things to different people. To me, I've come to define it as any process or anything that connects you to the whole. Anything that connects you to other people, to your environment, to the universe, that takes you away from the illusion of self is a spiritual process.
Okay.
So growing up in the Mormon church, calling each other brother and sister, and communing like that, that's spiritual. The part of the church that said, we are the only true church and the others are mistaken or not as good, that's not spiritual.
Okay.
The things that divide us aren't. The things that unite us are. Okay,
got it.
That's the way I use the term spiritual.
Okay.
And so many of the people I've talked to that have had these extraordinary experiences, typically called by the biomedical community psychosis, or bipolar, or schizoaffective, or schizophrenia.
Yeah.
So many of those experiences in the beginning, when you talk to people that talk about what it was like in the very beginning, before they got frightened, if there was a stage before they got frightened, they talk about this sense of unity, sense of oneness that comes over them, feeling ultra connected, and they struggle with trying to explain it because there's no language for it. We haven't got a language for this, and so they say things like, I felt like I was everything, but yet I was nothing, or my ego boundaries disappeared, and if somebody says that to you, what does that feel like? I've never had my ego boundaries disappear.
Right,
so
I got you.
But anyway, I hear that over and over again.
Okay.
And so, I mean, people call us all the time after they see this film and say, thank you so much for reframing what I went through, because I was told I was sick and, I could never recover. But I get to talk to these people about their initial experience, and a lot of things like that happen. That sense of unity, their creativity goes up, their inhibitions go down.
Wow.
A lot of people get naked in public because of their inhibitions just disappear, and that ends them up in jail. Their sense of time gets totally warped. They could be somewhere for 3 minutes and they think they've been there for 3 days or 3 hours, or vice versa. They could be somewhere all day and they think just 3 minutes went by.
Okay.
So time completely distorts. They get synchronicities, which is a term that Carl Jung, that psychologists use to explain these unusual coincidences. Like you're thinking about your great aunt that you haven't thought about in 2 years, and 10 minutes later the phone rings and there she is on the phone.
Wow.
Those are called synchronicities. They start getting those back to back, and that gets frightening. So there's these interesting things that happen, but that one, the main one I really hear a lot is that sense of unity. And basically, that's what the Tibetans are trying to get to, right? In their practice, get over self-cherishing, grasping, get over that sense of self-importance. Basically loosen those ego boundaries you have.
You're just a small speck in this whole universe, basically.
Yeah, and you're part of it.
You're just a small part of it. Yeah. Now, the synchronicity is really interesting. I'm sure people would say, hey, I was thinking about somebody and he or she called, or they come in, or, to be honest, it has happened to me too. Like in the sense, I was thinking, oh, I haven't seen that patient for a while. And then 2 days later, she has a broken tooth or pain or whatnot, and then she comes over. So, tell me more about synchronicity. How is that different, and how is that part of psychosis? And how is psychosis actually related to spirituality? You see what I'm saying? Psychosis, you gave me some basic key points. They had some extraordinary experiences. They're ultra connected, synchronicity, and and loss of the time warpage, right? How's that connected to spirituality?
Well, again, spirituality, as I've defined it, is just this feeling of ultra connectedness.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So by definition, that part is. Okay. But in terms of time and sense of self, the Hindus, as you probably know, and the Buddhists believe the self is an illusion, right? Yeah. I mean, that isn't a new concept. That's been around for thousands of years in these spiritual traditions. Time as a fixed entity, our sense of linear time, is also an illusion. And Einstein pointed that out with his theory of relativity. And so how it ties with spirituality, I know my definition is very limited, but that's the way I'm using it now. So
that makes sense. I think that makes sense.
But the time being, distorted in these experiences. I think, now I'm doing all these interviews with the neuroscientists that are involved in the renaissance of psychedelic research going on at Imperial College in London and at Johns Hopkins, Stanford, all these, UCLA, all these main colleges and universities. I could get into this subject, and that'd take a whole lot of time. But, what they're finding in terms of the part of our brain, they're using fMRI imaging, which tracks blood flow in the brain. So you can start to see when somebody has a certain abstract experience, what parts of the brain are talking to each other, and they call them networks.
Yeah.
And there's one that they're really getting a lot of attention called the default mode network, that they believe is responsible for our sense of time and our sense of self, amongst other things. It does a lot of other things. But so I I just think that this whole realm of these extraordinary experiences, whether they come on spontaneously through a quote unquote psychosis, or they come on through taking a substance like psilocybin or LSD or ayahuasca, or if they're brought on by devotion to a practice like yoga or meditation. I think there's a commonality in all those that is spiritual in nature.
Right.
In that your sense of self kind of blends into the whole.
Got it. Could you give any examples of those extraordinary experiences which people have, seen and experienced for the interviews that you've done? An example.
An example
of the extraordinary experiences, somebody might have experienced.
Yeah.
Did you know, like?
Well, yeah, let me just think of one person. Okay, so I'll think of this young woman by the name of Laura that has been diagnosed as bipolar.
Okay.
And she's in the process of trying to, she goes into these states spontaneously. Okay. And she's in the process of trying to find out, number one, why, and number two, how she can ground herself if she starts going too far.
Uh-huh.
So she is a writer and she's a jewelry maker. So she's kind of the writer artist.
Okay.
And she, when she first went into one of these states, she was 17 years old. She was just coming back from a trip to Honduras as an exchange student, I think. I forget. Okay. But anyway, she was down there with kids her age. She came back. She was also taking mefloquine, which is for malaria. So it's prophylactic for malaria. Chloroquine. And it's known for giving sort of bad dreams and even some psychosis experiences.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, I think she was taking that. She was taking a medication. That's what I assumed it was. So she goes into her first break when she's flying home to meet her parents. Okay. And she goes into this sense of oneness and unity. And it is the most beautiful thing she's ever experienced. In her way of experiencing it, she says, it was like falling in love. It was like somebody turned up the volume on all my senses. Everything looked a little bit more bright. The colors all looked brighter. The sounds were crisper. I could feel things at a level I'd never felt them before. And she said that it was almost taking the feeling of falling in love, that euphoric feeling, and turning up the volume on it way up. Wow. That's the feeling she got at first. And so she gets home and she said, I also had this feeling of interconnectedness and oneness. Like I knew this thing now and I had to go out and tell everybody because I needed to save the world, she said.
Wow. Okay.
So she gets home and she starts talking to her parents and they get totally frightened because she's gone nuts in their mind. She's left this reality.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, that is what sends most people into psychosis, what we call psychosis, where it becomes very distressing and hurtful and difficult to deal with, is the reaction of the people around the person when they're trying to explain it. And it's especially the people that love them the most that get the most frightened.
Right.
The parents, the lovers, the partner, the best friends, they all of a sudden, whoa, this person is no longer in my reality.
Yeah.
And you're losing the person, basically. And they get frightened. And so your senses are all tuned up, so you get frightened. You pick up their fear. You can sense it. And like Laura said, she said, um, I was trying to explain this to him, but no one was getting it. And, I feel so connected in it, but, they're not getting it. Something's wrong.
Got it.
And that's when she started getting into the negative part of the whole experience.
Now, we've been using this word shamanism and healer. And as a matter of fact, I think for the movie, they said from the Zambu tribe, Sekulan, the first lady, she has become a respected healer and predictor. That was the word used. Now, what does a healer mean? I mean, do I go to them and they would heal me of my pain or my fever, or So, what is healer actually would mean in this regard?
In Sekulan's case, she is a predictor. She's known for her visionary abilities, seeing things outside of time, so to speak. She can see things that are going to happen in the future.
Oh, wow.
She's famous for that in the Samburu tribe. She's also a healer, but the healers, I've thought about it often in terms of how they are effective in their work. And part of it, I'm sure, is placebo.
Okay.
They're known as being these powerful people with extraordinary abilities.
Yeah.
And so when somebody goes to them, and by the way, most of the people in these communities I visit are believing in spirit energy that's in everything. There's spirits in the mountains, there's spirits in the rivers and the forests, and they're in touch with ancestor spirits, their ancestors. And these shaman are like the Kutan in Tibet.
Right.
Are known for their ability to contact these spirit entities.
Okay.
And get information from them and bring that information on what it's going to take to heal back to the person. So that's kind of what they're doing. And, they work in different ways. There's a lot of them in the Philippines that used to, by sleight of hand, reach into somebody and have some blood hidden in their hand, pull out like they pulled out a tumor or something, and said, here's a tumor I just pulled out. But that has an amazing placebo effect. And that's the thing that we tried to bring out in CrazyWise about somebody in psychosis, especially. Most of these things happen before you're 24 years old.
Yes, I remember.
They happen to young people.
Yeah.
And so if you're 20 years old and you've gone off the rails because you've gotten a bad grade while you're away at college for the first time, or your girlfriend or boyfriend dumps you, and you go into one of these states,
right,
and you go to the doctor, and the doctor says, unfortunately, you've got a brain problem, a defective brain right now. You've got a chemical imbalance of your brain.
Right.
And we're going to rebalance it with these chemicals to try and get you back to normal. And basically what they are is downers. They tamp down your emotions if you're really hot.
Right.
But just the placebo effect of, going to an expert who's telling you have this incurable defect in your brain that has to be managed with a lifetime of medications is in itself very self-fulfilling and damaging. And what a shaman kid is told when they go to their elders with that same issue is, you've got a very special sensitivity. Yeah, it's difficult, but you can learn to manage it. And we're going to give you somebody to help you do that, an older shaman that's been through it.
Right.
They know about it. and they're going to help you go through this and bring you through this initiation. And once you do that, you're going to be valuable to us. We'll use. So the person is given a positive framework about what's going on, and told that they're going to have meaning and purpose when they come out the other side. And that's quite the opposite of what we're giving people that go in for a diagnosis in our culture.
Yeah, but I was actually, I was very proud that I was watching your movie. So I, went on Twitter, and talking all about it, or maybe I wanted some likes myself, just like on Facebook. So one of these guys come up to me and he tweeted to me, I forgot his name, and he said, "Oh, doctors as if they know everything," Basically, he was referring to, multi-drugs regimen, which is given to psychosis patients, bipolar patients, and so on. And that got me thinking, because I'm partly related to a medical ward, being a dentist. I realized if I do something which is not the norm, which is against my training, I am inviting trouble.
Yeah.
I'm inviting trouble for myself.
Right.
So I wanted him to understand, and even the public to understand, maybe the doctors understand what's going on, but they are also shackled in a way to go with the norm. So it has to come right from the top, like from American medical associations or a parallel association who deals with mental disorders. That, okay, you know what? There are healers. There is psychotherapy. There is community involvement. This is all okay. For them, for a medical professional to actually do it, for actually accept that kind of a new form of treatment, for the lack of a better term, or new form of managing the case, I should say, right? But I understand the patient's frustration, and at the same time the doctor's frustration. So it has to come from all the way up top. That's my opinion.
Well, I'll have to differ with you.
Okay, fair enough. Yeah, sure.
I think it has to come from the bottom.
Okay.
I think I think the pressure now is coming from the bottom, and I mean from the patients.
Okay.
The patients who have had this experience and it hasn't worked for them, and they're coming up and saying, we need alternatives. And the doctors, as you say, are shackled because they, for one thing, insurance.
Yeah.
If you want to get paid, you're gonna toe the company line, and the pharmaceutical industry. And again, I'm not against pharmaceuticals.
Yeah.
They're being way overused right now, especially in kids, in my opinion.
Right.
But everybody I've talked to says, I'm glad I have that in my toolbox.
Right.
Every mental health worker, mental health professional.
Right.
But I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were talking about that it has to come from the
bottom. Yeah. So, the people that are making the changes are people that have been, well, first of all, think of all the stigma there is around having a mental condition.
Sure.
Try to get a job, and have that on your record. Try to get a partner.
Yep. Yeah.
All that, you're crippled. You've been hexed into being this second-class citizen, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And so these people have, mainly because of the internet, they've found each other online and can join anonymously these discussion groups where they start sharing their ideas. I experienced this. Did you experience that? Yeah, I had something kind of like that.
Yeah.
And they're forming, and that's why there's a whole movement called the peer movement,
Okay.
where they're pairing people in the middle of their episode, are trying to deal with their episode with somebody who's already been through it and successfully navigated it.
Right.
Much like the older shaman coming down to the young person having the issues. and working with them. So these groups are forming in a grassroots level, and that's why I think it's like politics. Do you think our president is going to all of a sudden wake up to what should be done? It's going to come from the base. It has to come from, the politicians just answer what the people want, basically. They just want to stay in power.
Right.
What keeps them in power is their popularity with the populace. So it has to come from the base, I think.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. But I'll tell you this, I showed the film at the American Psychiatric Association's annual convention in New York.
Okay.
In 2018.
Okay.
And the discussion that went on after the film lasted 3 hours.
I'm not surprised.
But basically, and by the way, only 150 people came to see the film.
Yeah.
It was just one of the events in many, many events going on.
Sure.
And there were 13,000 people at this convention.
Fair enough.
So just so they were self-selected. But the discussion was mainly about who's going to change the paradigm, who's responsible for changing this belief system.
Sure.
That it's a chemical imbalance of the brain, which has never been proven, and they all know that.
Okay.
It's a convenient metaphor to tell a patient.
Makes sense.
But it isn't. There's no proof to it.
Right.
You don't get a blood test to see if you've got schizophrenia. It's all behavior and emotional symptoms.
Sure.
So there's no chemical imbalance that's been proven.
It was a perfect time because we were, I think, segueing into Tim Ferriss questions. So these are the questions which Tim Ferriss asks himself to his own guests. And I find them to be pretty valuable to know the guest,
Okay. Great.
You can take as much time as you want. You can, breeze through or whatever you like. Okay.
Yeah.
So now, what is your morning ritual, if you have any?
Yeah. When I'm home, when I'm on the road, it all falls apart. When I'm home, I usually wake up around 6:30, 7.
Yeah.
I get up and I meditate first.
Okay.
Then I either do an hour of yoga, or I ride my bike, or I lift weights.
Okay.
One of those three.
Okay.
And then I come back and eat breakfast.
Okay.
And I live on an island, and I ride my bike around the island.
Okay.
And so I come back and eat my breakfast. So that's my morning ritual.
So how do you decide what you are going to do today? So meditation is every day, I'm presuming, right?
Yeah. Meditation is every day. I've started, when I do yoga, sometimes I'll skip my meditation because I consider yoga a meditative practice.
Got it.
It's it gets you to be in the present while you're thinking about the positions you're in.
Yeah.
But I usually do meditation first or yoga first, and then I will either ride my bike or lift weights.
Okay. Now, how do you do meditation? Do you use a guided meditation?
Um, I Yeah, I usually do it to some sort of sounds. I have a this one where I just follow my breath, but it's a bong that goes so it's like gets you down to like 6 breaths a minute, I think it is.
Okay.
And that's where it's supposed to work on your coherence. Um, so I use that, the gong. I also use this, Sam Harris.
Yeah.
He's Tim Ferriss
Yeah.
likes Sam Harris.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I've used his before. I'm not using it right now. I'm using another guy's. He's a chiropractor, Joe Dispenza.
Oh,
The person that lives downstairs from us here turned me on to him, and yet I told you a little bit about it. One of them is Blessings of the Energy Centers. He
Okay.
calls it.
okay.
He starts with the root chakra, works all the way up, and you're basically blessing those centers with higher vibrations of
Okay.
thoughts of, I think of it, people I love and people that love me, and the gratitude I have for the marvelous life I've had and
Right.
am having,
Yeah.
and just my sense of joy for being alive. And I infuse every center with that. And that's his meditation. And I like that one.
Okay.
I've only been doing it a month or two.
Okay.
So I experiment with different things in that realm,
Sure.
and also try to stay more present during the day, during my
Yeah.
times when I start wandering a bit.
And regarding bike, seems like you've been biking forever, right?
Yeah.
So, do you have any advice for somebody stupid like me who bought the bike but never rode? And for me, I bought a bike, but I couldn't ride a lot because I couldn't really enjoy biking. So, how would you recommend somebody to start with biking?
Oh.
You know?
Well, the reason I bike is because I don't want to blow out my knees. I'm 77 years old, so my knees are important to me.
Sure.
And my wife runs,
Okay.
and she's run marathons, and I'm not into running. I just don't want to beat myself up like that. So
Okay.
biking, and I don't like swimming. I don't like getting in a chlorinated pool. And,
Yeah. Okay.
So that leaves me with a low impact type of thing in biking. But I've injured myself several times in biking. One, I've chipped a bunch of teeth,
Okay.
and I've got a shoulder that's broken because of it. But at the same time, I still have my knees.
Got it.
I'm pretty active. I'm very active actually, and I don't want to be immobile.
Well, you are 77 and you look pretty good for 77, What other activities do you do apart from these 4: meditation, yoga?
Yeah, in
weights, and
terms
bike?
of staying in shape and discipline to take care of myself. That's it. Brushing my teeth, eating. I'm not a vegan, but I'm close to it. I don't eat much meat.
Okay.
I do eat a lot of salmon. We live up in the Northwest, and it's available to us.
Yeah.
So I eat a pretty good diet. My wife's a great cook, and we eat really well.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Okay.
I try to get good sleep. I'm not the best sleeper in the world. I wake up in the middle of the night.
Okay.
And sometimes have to read myself back to sleep.
Yeah, me too. I think I was too excited today, and usually I don't get up in the middle of the night. But 3:30, I got up. I was like, "Oh, I have an interview with Dr. Phil today." I was like probably way too excited. Somebody of your caliber, basically a TED speaker. This is the first time for my podcast, right?
Oh, okay.
So it's a big deal for me, and thank you for coming, by the way.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Now, the most gifted book you have given, if any,
The most
gifted books. Any book have you gifted?
that I gift. You know, I don't gift that many books.
Okay.
I tell people things I've read that really excite me.
Okay.
My last one was gifted to me. So yeah, so that tells you a little bit about myself. Uh, it was a book called Meta Modern.
Meta modern. Okay.
Yeah, and it's all about the phases of human evolution, like the pre industrial times. The it's called indigenous times, then the pre-industrial agricultural period, then the modern period, then the postmodern period. Now we're starting to enter the meta-modern.
Ah, okay.
And basically, it's a great book. I really opened me. I didn't even know what postmodern meant, really, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
And it's really just a deconstruction of the modern beliefs.
Okay.
And looking at them and realizing that a lot of our beliefs are contextual. It depends on the context of what your culture says determines your beliefs. But anyway, meta modern is going back and picking up the things that serve the human condition that we've sort of discarded. So it really appealed to me because, our brains evolved over 200,000 years while we were hunter-gatherers,
right,
basically. Mm-hmm. And we lived that kind of lifestyle in these small, under 50 inhabitant communities.
Right.
And so our brains need that type of socialness.
Sure.
And that type of lifestyle that's heavily connected to nature, that's very social and taking care of one another. The things I was talking about in the beginning.
Right.
Anyway, that's meta-modern, picking up on the things. And now we live in these nation states, and we got to learn how to adapt what our needs are to that kind of an environment. We can't go back living in 30-member groups out in the forest.
Right.
So what are the things that allowed us to build nation states? And that's common belief systems, common gods, so to speak. We built one around an economy and money, but is that all we need to take it to the next step, which is a global community to solve the problems we have to solve, like climate change and terrorism and all those global issues? How are we going to build a belief system to bring us together at that level? So that's a book about that, and I really enjoyed it. So I've recommended that a lot to people.
Sure. Good. Thank you for sharing that. Any best purchase that you made between $100 to $300 that impacted your life in a positive way?
$100 to $300. Well, yeah, I would say the devices that have helped me meditate.
Okay. Yeah.
And the podcasts are the not like Sam Harris's piece and Joe Dispenza's, and I forget the guy that gave me the gong.
Oh, yeah.
But all those were under $100.
Sure.
And but I think in terms of impacting my life, I think those things have probably, at least from my perspective right now, changed things for the better for me in the most, for bang for the buck, that probably did it the most.
Sure. So when you think of a person being successful, who are the two people that come into your mind?
Oh.
Successful people, and they could be alive, they could be
Yeah.
be dead.
I mean, I know he had a lot of flaws, but like we all do. But the one person I really admired was John Lennon.
Okay, yeah.
Just for speaking his truth and all the time, in spite of the consequences,
Yeah.
and having that talent, that musical talent,
Sure.
and lyrical talent.
Right.
And the Dalai Lama.
Okay.
He has influenced me so much as just a person who is a leader and sticks to principle in spite of everything going on. I mean, he has to hold back the young people in Tibet. They want to riot.
Yeah.
They've had it.
Yeah.
In fact, they essentially burned down Lhasa right before the Beijing Olympics.
Mm.
And because it's a Chinese city now.
Yeah.
And they've got spies in the monasteries and everything like that. So, and he threatened to quit unless they stopped taking that path.
Wow.
So they all pulled back. But, he really sticks to principle. And I really admire that. And he's admired by his people more than any politician we've ever had,
right.
than we've ever admired, any leader or anything. And he isn't in it for becoming more popular or becoming more admired. So anyway,
yeah.
Dalai Lama.
Got it. Thank you. What do people never ask you that you wish they did?
Oh, geez. These are hard questions.
Thank you, Tim Ferriss.
What motivates you?
Okay.
They don't ask me what motivates me.
Okay. So now I should ask you.
And maybe it's because I've just started thinking about this. Not what I want to be.
Okay.
Not what I'm trying to accomplish. Not what I wish I could accomplish. Not, how do I feel? It's what motivates you. And the reason I say I wish they would, because that's a thing I'm starting to want to think about more and more.
Okay.
Because I know when I wanted to be an orthodontist, I knew what motivated me then. Mm-hmm. I wanted money. I didn't know a thing about it.
Right.
When I wanted to do something different, especially photography, I wanted to be known for my work.
Mm-hmm.
And I got some of that, and I got money because I grew up poor, and now it's like, okay, what motivates me now? Because I'm not motivated by those things anymore.
Right.
So what motivates me? And the best thing I can come up with nowadays is my curiosity. But nobody asks me about that. And I think that's the thing we should be asking each other.
Right.
What really is behind what you're doing, and think about that. Is that true to who you are?
Now, what is one exercise that somebody can do to, introspect, to understand, what really motivates, what he himself?
That's a good one. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know, because I'm asking myself now what motivates me, and I think I know. I mean, curiosity, that's an easy answer, but I don't know if it's the answer for me. So I don't know. I don't know a good way but just to stop and think about it, and I could have saved myself a lot of trouble as a kid if I realized that, just wanting more money and that's the total motivation isn't good enough. That's not a good enough reason for doing something or taking a path, or just wanting to be famous isn't a good reason. It's what our culture really values, and but that's not a good enough reason. They're not really core. They're not things that that your soul is crying out to do.
Right, right. How are you introspecting these days? What is your ritual? Are you writing? Are you meditating? I mean, you are meditating, but what I'm saying is, how are you talking to yourself, introspecting what motivates you?
Yeah, very good question. Is that a Tim Ferriss question?
No, this is follow up.
I think that's a good one. How am I?
How are you doing it right now, like in your life at this stage?
Introspecting to find out my motivation.
Right, at this stage, you yourself.
Yeah. I just started thinking about it.
Okay.
There was a kid on a podcast I listened to that my wife turned me on to.
Who's that?
And I say a kid, he's a young guy out of Harvard. He's now a professor at Harvard.
Sure.
And he wrote a book called Dark Horse.
Okay.
And it's all about this, finding your motivation, and the people that are truly happy with what they're doing and successful. And that only accounts to about 13% of our population that are happy and successful. The rest of us either are just tolerating our jobs or absolutely hate our jobs.
Right. No, completely agree.
But anyway, he's talking a lot about that. We need to start doing that in early education. And it really struck a chord with me. Here I am at 77 thinking, okay, let me start thinking about what I should have thought about when I was 10.
Well, so I think I just dug up his name, Todd Rose.
Yeah, first name is Todd.
Yeah, Todd Rose. Okay.
Yeah.
For people who are
listening. He was on Dax Shepard had him on, if you want to listen to his podcast.
Okay, Dax Shepard.
Dax Shepard does his podcast with, he's an actor married to another actress. So he's sort of well-known that way.
Yeah.
But he has his podcast called Armchair Expert.
Okay.
And it's long form, so you might enjoy it.
Sure. Any other podcast that you listen to?
Not really.
Okay.
I was listening to Tim Ferriss. I listened to a little bit of Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
But not really.
Okay.
I'm not a big connoisseur of podcasts, but I do like the form. I mean, it's great.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So, if you could go back in your career or life and change one decision, what would that be?
One decision.
Yep.
Yeah. I think it would be, It's hard to say because one thing leads to another so often. But I would say I would definitely go back and, as we just said, really try to understand my motivations and have somebody helping me that would say, this is a dead end. This could be a dead end.
Yeah.
You need more than this.
Yeah.
You need more than just needing to make more money.
Yep.
You need something. If I had somebody around me at that time to advise me.
Yep.
But, so many people, parents will discourage their child from the art that they're in love with, mainly because you'll never be able to support yourself with this.
Right.
And I think it's a big mistake. Because whatever you're in love with and passionate about is going to take you somewhere, I think.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So, any particular quote that you follow?
Coach?
Quote. A quote.
A code.
Or let me twist this a little bit. So, if you have a giant billboard such that you could display a great message or a quote for everyone to follow, right? Of course, not about your company or your podcast.
Yeah.
What would you like to tell people?
I mean, this would be love yourself. I think all health comes from that. And it's a very deep one. It's like not an easy one to really successfully accomplish. But it's very trite and it's very cliche in a way. But I think it's one of the. It's maybe because I've had a difficulty doing that in my life.
Right.
But
I think I talk to so many dentists, right? I mean, my friends are dentists. Most of them are dentists. And, I don't want to say all of them or most of them. I cannot say anything about them, what they think. But many of them actually are annoyed of dentistry.
Annoyed?
Yeah.
They don't like it.
Yeah, they don't like it. They just don't want to do it. They're just doing it because they spend, 4 years, 5 years, 6 years in dentistry. They made a living out of it. It's respectful, people, respect them. But they're miserable in a way. But I think your giant billboard message that love yourself and follow that what you really want to do, it'll take you somewhere. It could be good for everybody, and especially for the dental population. If you don't really like it, just leave it and just go to the next step. Go to photography, go to marketing, go to business, go to movie making and whatnot.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's a good message for the population, I should say.
No. To be connected to your work is very important, and to have meaning and purpose in it.
Right.
I think it has to bring you some meaning and purpose, that either just for the love of it, or especially if you can create your own meaning around that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing all that. Thanks a lot about your time. Would you like to get a really small email a couple times a month to see what hashtag POD is up to? What are we reading? What are we listening to? What are we doing? What's stupid, funny, entertaining, and some weird stuff that we've gotten ourselves into? Then go to podcastsofdentistry.com/extra. EXTRA. That's right, podcastsofdentistry.com/extra. And you will get a really small email from us to give you that little extra kick and keep you busy exploring the world we travel. You can also find us on Facebook at podcastsofdentistry.com/Facebook. Thank you for listening, hashtag POD, and I'll see you inside.